We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Beis Amid Beis in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 92b. The Gemara is bringing Rava's source for the idea that poverty follows the poor. It says by Tzaras, V'tamei Tamei Yikra. It says he's going to call out that he's Tamei. And Rashi explains, V'tamei Tamei lo dai lo nigo. It's not enough that he has Tzaras. Ela shemevayesh es atzmo al karcho hitel alav hakasav chova. But he has to also embarrass himself by publicizing his condition. That's what the pasuk is saying over here. And therefore we see this idea that poverty follows the poor. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa damar Rabbanan. From where do we know this idea that the Rabbanan say, Hashkem ve'echol bekayetz b'mnei achama, that you should get up early and eat in the summer because of the sun, that if you eat in the morning, it will protect you from the sun. Uvechoref mipnei hatzin, and also if you eat in the morning, in the winter, it will protect you from the cold. V'amri inshi, and furthermore, people say, Shisin ruhute wrote, there could be 60 runners that are running, v'lo matu legaver de mitzafra krach, and they won't be able to catch up to the guy who ate in the morning. It seems to be a healthy thing to eat in the morning. Where do we know that idea? Because it's written lo yiravu v'lo yitzmu v'lo yakim shara v'shemesh. It says that they're not famished, they're not thirsty, and the heat is not going to affect them. You see this idea that the weather will not affect those who eat. And so the idea is, again, one who eats in the morning, one who drinks in the morning will not be affected. And the Gemara continues, Amar Le, he said to him, At Amrin Mehasam, you say the source is from over there. But I say the source is from over here. Vavadetem es Hashem Elokeichem, it says you serve Hashem, Zu Kriyas Shema U'Tfila, that refers to Kriyas Shema and davening. Uverech es Lachem Chavias Memecha, then it says he's going to bless your bread and your water. Zu Pas B'Melech, this refers to bread and salt. V'kiton Shel Mayim, and a flask of water. Mikan V'Elech, if you have that, V'Hasirosi Machlam Mikirbecha, then I will remove sickness from your midst. Again, the idea that eating in the morning will serve as a protection. V'Tanyan, we learned in a Braisa Machala, when it says that I'm going to remove the Machala, Zu Mora, this refers to bile. V'Lama Nikra Shma Machala, why is bile referred to as a Machala? Sheshmonim Ushlosha Choloyin Yeshba, because there are 83 different illnesses that are contained within it. Why do we say 83? Machala B'Gematria Hachi Hava, because the Gematria of Machala is 83. V'Kulan, and all of them, Pas B'Melach, Shacharis, V'Kiton Shalmayim, if a person has bread and salt in the morning and a flask of water, Mevalan, it will nullify these illnesses. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa damar Rabbanan. From where do we know this idea that the Rabbanan say, Chavrach kirya chamer, that if your friend calls you a donkey, uchfa l'gabech mush, you should prepare a saddle for yourself. Amarle said to him, because it's written, Vayomar Hagar shifchas sarai, emi zevos v'yonas eilechi. So the Malach said to Hagar, he said, Hagar, the maidservant of Sarai, where are you coming from and where are you going? Vatomer, and she said, Mimnei Sarai gevirti anochi borachas, that I'm running away from Sarai, who is my mistress. And so she refers to herself as the servant of Sarai, even though she was no longer the servant. That's because that's what she was referred to as. So she responded in kind. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa de amri inshi. From where do we know this idea that people say, Milsa genoa de isbach, if there's something derogatory about you, Kadim Amra, you should be the first one to say it. Amarle said back to him, because it's written, Vayomer Eved Avram Anochi. It says that he said, I am the servant of Avram. He right away introduced himself in that fashion. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa de amri inshi. From where do we know this idea that people say, Shafil Azal bar Avza, that the goose, it bends its head low when it's walking. However, ve'enim etayfi, but its eyes look ahead for food. The idea is that it acts with humility, but it's still looking out for itself in the future. Amar Lei said back to him, because it's written, this is by Avigail and David HaMelech, ve'heitav Hashem la'adoni, it says that Hashem should do good to my master. She speaks with humility. However, she says, ve'zacharta samasecha, but you should remember your maidservant. She's looking to the future, that David HaMelech should protect her husband. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa damri inshi. From where do we know this idea that people say, Shisin tichle mati l'kocha de kol chavre shama v'lo achal. There are 60 discomforts that happen to a person's teeth when he hears his friend eating and he's not also eating together with him. The idea is that person might be invited somewhere to eat and he wasn't invited. How do we know that causes pain and discomfort? Amarle said to him, because it's written, V'li ani avdecha u'litzadok hakohen v'livnayo v'en Yehoyada v'lishlomo avdecha lo kara. This is talking about at the inauguration of Adoniyahu. So it says, Nasan Hanavi, to me, your servant, and to Tzadok, and to Benayo, and to Shlomo, your servant, we were not called in this celebration. Amar Leh, he said back to him, Ata Amr Mehasam, you say the source is from there. Ve'ano Amina Mehacha, but I say it's from over here, from the following pasuk. Vayiviyeha Yitzchak ha'oel Sarah imo v'yikach es Rivka v'atihi lo le'isha vayehaveh. It says that Yitzchak brought Rivka to the tent of Sarah, his mother, and he married Rivka, and he loved her. Vayinachim Yitzchak acharei imo. So it talks about the fact that Yitzchak took a wife. Uchsib basrei, and it says right after that, Vayosef Avraham v'yikach isha u'shma Keturah. It says that then Avram went along and he took a wife whose name was Keturah. So it's the same basic idea. He saw that Yitzchak was getting married, so he too felt that he had to get married. And Rashi explains, V'li ani avdecha, again, Nasan how Navi says that myself, I was not invited to this coronation banquet. Alma kovel haya olav shelo zimna limishta. You see that he was mourning the fact that he was not invited to this banquet. And similarly, Vayosef Avram niskane b'Yitzchak. Avram was jealous of Yitzchak after Yitzchak got married, and so he got married as well. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa damri inshi. From where do we know this idea that people say, Chamra l'Mori, that the wine belongs to the owner, but tivusa l'shaki, but the gratitude goes to the one who pours the wine. Amarle said to him, because it's written, V'samachtas yodcha olav. It says that Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, you're going to rest your hands upon Yehoshua, transfer the authority to Yehoshua, L'man yishmun v'yirun kol hadas b'nei Yisrael, so that everyone should hear and see. Ochsiv Yehoshua bin nun mali ruach chochma ki samach Moshe Yad of Olav, Vayishmu Elav Kol Bnei Yisrael. It says Yehoshua ben Nun was filled with a spirit of wisdom because Moshe rested his hands upon him, and everybody listened to him in Bnei Yisrael. The idea is Moshe is given credit, even though Moshe was just a conduit. It's really coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The one who pours gets the credit, not necessarily the owner, so to speak. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa damri inshi. From where do we know this idea that people say Kalba bechafne gelole mevala, that a dog in its hunger is even going to swallow dung? T'chsiv, as it's written, Nefesh seveya tavos nofes. If you have a soul that is satisfied, so it despises even honey. V'nefesh roeva kol mar mosuk. But the soul that is hungry, even things that are bitter taste sweet. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa da'amri inshi. From where do we know this idea that people say, Mitayil v'azel dikla bisha gabekina desharchi, that the bad date palm, it strolls among the barren grove of trees. The idea is that bad people seek out other bad people. Amarle, he said to him, Davar zeh kasa b'Torah shonim b'Neviim u'meshulish b'Ksuvim. This idea is written in the Torah, it's repeated in the Navi, it's said a third time in the Ksuvim. Utanan b'Masnis, and it's also taught in the Mishnah, v'Tanina b'Braisa, and it's also taught in the Braisa. Kasa b'Torah, we see it written in the Torah, d'chsiv, as it's written, Vayelech Esav el Yishmael. It says that Esav went to Yishmael. The idea that bad people go to bad people. Shonim b'Neviim, it's said again in the Neviim and the prophets, d'chsiv, as it's written, Vayeslaktu el Yiftach anoshim rekim, that empty people, they gathered around Yiftach. Vayiyu imo, and they were with him. Umeshulish b'Ksuvim, and it said a third time in the Ksuvim, d'chsiv, as it's written, Kol of lamino yishkon. It says that all the birds go to their own kind. Uvnei adam ladomalo, the people go to those also their own kind. Tanan b'Masnis, and it's also taught in the Mishnah, Kol ha'mechuber l'tamei tamei, anything that's attached to something tamei is also tamei, and Kol ha'mechuber l'tar tar, anything that's attached to something that's tahar is also tahar. And finally, v'tanina b'Braisa, it's also learned in the Braisa. Rabbi Eliezer says, Lo lechinam holach zarzir eitz al-orev. It's not for nothing that the zarzir, which is a kind of non-kosher bird, goes to the orev, goes to the raven. Elo memneshu mino. The reason is because they're of the same kind. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa da'amri inshi. From where do we know this idea that people say, Kares chavrach v'lo anach, if you call your friend and he doesn't answer you, Rami guda Rabba shadi be, you should throw up a large wall at him. The idea is you should no longer try to help him. Amarle said back to him, Yanti articha, it's from a pasuk. The pasuk says, Yanti articha v'lo tiart mi tu masech. Since I tried to purify you, but you weren't purified from your tumah, lo tetariot, so no longer, I will no longer purify you. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa da'amri inshi. From where do we know this idea that people say, Bira deshasas minei lo sishti beikala, the pit which you drank from, you shouldn't throw a stone in it, meaning to say something which helped you, you shouldn't treat it in a bad fashion. Amarle said to him, because it's written, Lo sesayev adomi ki achichahu, you shouldn't abhor an adomi because he's your brother. V'lo sesayev mitzri, and also the same thing by the Egyptians, ki ger ha'yisa b'artzo, because you were a stranger in his land, since they hosted you, so therefore you should not despise them. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa damriinshi. From where do we know this idea that people say, Idol is dura dalina, if you lift the load together with me, then I will lift it. V'lo lo dalina, but if you don't lift it together with me, then I won't lift it. Amarle, he said to him, Dechsiv, because it's written, this is by Barak, Vayomer Elah Barak. It says that Barak said to Devorim, Telchi imi v'halachti, if you go with me, then I'll go with you. V'im lo telchi imi, but if you don't go with me, lo elech, then I won't go with you. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Menoha milsa damriinshi. From where do we know this idea that people say, Kad havinon zutre legavri, when we were younger we were considered like men. Hashla de kashishna, but now that we're older, ledardiki, we're considered like children. Amarle said to him, Mei karaksiv, because originally the pasuk says, V'Hashem holech lifneim yomam ba'amud onan, lanchosam haderech v'layla ba'amud eish lahir lahem. It says that Hashem himself went in front of them in the day in a pillar of cloud to lead them on the path, and at night a pillar of fire to bring light to them, meaning when they were young in the wilderness, then Hashem himself, so to speak, guided Klal Yisrael. Ulavasof, but at the end, ksiv, then it's written, it wasn't Hashem himself guiding Klal Yisrael. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Gimel Amud Aleph.